पाकिस्तान की लड़ाई थी, वो लड़ाई भारत पर भी आ गई है।
Instrument of Surrender, Dhaka, 1971. The Pakistan Eastern Command agrees to surrender all Pakistan armed forces in Bangladesh to Lieutenant General Jagjit Singh Arora, General Officer Commanding-in-Chief of Indian and Bangladesh forces in the Eastern Theater. This surrender includes all Pakistan land, air, and naval forces, as well as all paramilitary forces and civil armed forces. These forces will lay down their arms and surrender at the places where they are currently located to the nearest regular troops under the command of Lieutenant General Jagjit Singh Arora. The instrument of surrender was signed by the Pakistani and Indian commanders in Dhaka on the 16th of December 1971. 50 years ago, India imposed a crushing defeat on Pakistan. The country was split into two, and a new nation was created, Bangladesh. This is Dhaka's Suravardi Udyan, formerly known as Ramna Racecourse. This was the venue of the surrender ceremony that took place 5 decades ago. In this iconic photograph, you can see the chief of the Pakistani forces, General Amir Abdullah Khan Niazi, signing the agreement with Lieutenant General Jagjit Singh Arora, the general officer commanding-in-chief of the Eastern Command during the Indo-Pakistan War of 1971. It was India's greatest military triumph. The Indian military's thumping winds on land, sea, and air crushed Pakistan. It lost half of its territory with the birth of Bangladesh. The Pakistan Army surrendered with 93,000 soldiers, the biggest ever surrender after the Second World War.
16th December is one of the red letter days in the history of independent India, not only independent India, in the history of the world military history. There has not been a single instance when through a military action, a nation has been created.
This is an unparalleled victory, the like of which very few nations can claim to have achieved. The outcome of the victory has changed not only the geography of South Asia, but even the political landscape of South Asia, and I would say Asia as a whole.
The war lasted only 13 days. It saw many air combat engagements. The war began on the 3rd December 1971, when Pakistan's Air Force launched Operation Genghis Khan, a preemptive strike on 11 Indian air stations. It paved the way for India's formal entry into the war. In the following days, the IAF conducted nearly 6,000 sorties in the eastern and western fronts. Air power was a very significant contributor to the historic victory. On the other hand, the Indian Navy conducted one of the most successful offenses in modern naval history, Operation Trident. On the night of the 4th of December, a group of 3 small missile boats of the Indian Navy carried out an audacious attack near the Karachi port, sinking 4 Pakistani ships. It was a turning point of the 1971 war with Pakistan.
The Indian Army is in Bangladesh. Your air force has been destroyed. You are surrounded on all sides. And if you don't surrender, you will be killed unmercifully.
"You surrender or we wipe you out," was the message given by Field Marshal Sam Manekshaw to Pakistan on the 13th of December 1971. The Indian Army's achievements during this war have few parallels in history.
फौज का काम है लड़ने का, कमांडर का काम है फौज को तैयार रखने का और प्लान देने का। मैंने उनको प्लान दिया था और लड़ाई के पहले लद्दाख से लेके पूरा बॉर्डर तक मैं जाकर सब जवानों को मिलता था। 3000 जवान, 4000 जवान, 5000, और उनके साथ पहले ही बात करता था, बिल्कुल सफाई के बाद, कि मैंने आपको ट्रेनिंग दी है, मैंने हथियार दिया है, मैंने प्लान बनाया है, एक चीज़ नहीं दी, मेरा दिल। अब मैं अगली दफ़ा मिलूँगा आपको तो पाकिस्तान के अंदर मिलूँगा। उनकी मोराल बहुत हाई थी।
Once the instrument of surrender was signed, the Indian Army had the responsibility of transporting the 93,000 Pakistani prisoners of war safely to India. In an interview given to our network in 1997, Field Marshal Manekshaw told us about his experience of interacting with Pakistani prisoners of war.
तो जब मैं ये 93,000 पाकिस्तान सिपाही और उनकी फैमिलीज़ वगैरह ले आया, तो फिर मेरी फ़र्ज़ थी कि उनको संभालना। तो मैंने उनको कैंप में लगाया। आपको एक किस्सा बताऊं। उनको मैंने जो कैंप में लगाया, 5000 यहाँ, 4000 यहाँ, 6000 यहाँ, और मैं जाया करता था मिलने। मैं जब एक कैंप में गया तो वहाँ सब सूबेदार मेजर और सरदार थे। तो जब मैं गया, मैंने सूबेदार मेजर साहब, पाकिस्तान सूबेदार मेजर साहब के हाथ मिलाया। मैंने कहा, साहब मैं देख सकता हूँ? आप कहते साहब देखिए। और वही सवाल हमेशा जो मेरे जवानों से पूछता हूँ वही पूछा कि साहब पलंग में खटमल तो नहीं है? कि नहीं साहब। मच्छरदानी है? मच्छरदानी, हाँ साहब। मैं लंगर में जा सकता हूँ? तो लंगर में गया, वो जवान रोटी कूट रहा था जैसे अपने करते, उससे मैं खाना टेस्ट कर सकता हूँ। फिर लेट्रीन में गया, वहाँ पाकिस्तानी काम करता था, मैंने हाथ मिलाया। उसने इनकार किया, मैं क्यों मेरे साथ हाथ भी नहीं मिलाएगा? तो उसने हाथ मिलाया। जब हम वापस आ गए तो वो सूबेदार मेजर साहब मुझे कहते हैं कि हजूर आप गुस्ताखी माफ़ करेंगे? मैं कहा, आप सूबेदार मेजर साहब हैं, जो मर्जी है कहें। कहता, अब हमें मालूम हो गई साहब कि आपकी फ़ौज क्यों जीती है। आप आए, आपने हमसे पूछा खाना ठीक है, खटमल तो नहीं है, मच्छरदानी है वगैरह, के साथ भी आपने हाथ में। हमारे साहब लोग ऐसा नहीं करते, वो अपने आप को नवाबजादे समझते हैं।
Although the war is remembered for the liberation of Bangladesh, some of the most gallant military operations were those that were fought on the Western Front. The Battle of Longewala in the Thar Desert of Rajasthan was one of them. It has been depicted in great detail in filmmaker J.P. Dutta's 1997 movie, Border. Under the dogged leadership of Major Kuldeep Singh Chandpuri, 120 Indian soldiers held off more than 2,000 Pakistani soldiers and 40 tanks.
First time the armed forces had a decisive victory, and it changed the dynamics of the region. The morale of the Pakistan army was really hit, and that of the Indian armed forces was, greatly on top. The synergy between the three services in 1971 war, whether it was at the level of Manekshaw, PC Lal, and Admiral Nanda in Delhi, or the local commanders in the east and in the West. I must tell you that we often concentrate in Bangladesh, but the air operations support of the Indian Army and knocking off the airfields in the West was no less important.
To commemorate 50 years of the historic victory. Last year, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi flagged off the celebrations on the 16th of December. The 1971 victory was significant on many counts. The war changed the geopolitics of the entire region. In August 1971, India had signed a treaty of peace, friendship and cooperation with the Soviet Union, while Pakistan received active support from the United States. Much has been said about the hostility between US President Richard Nixon and Indian Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. Nixon and his assistant for national security affairs, Henry Kissinger, even encouraged China, a long-standing ally of Pakistan, to mobilize its armed forces along its border with India. But the Indo-Soviet Treaty was undoubtedly a major deterrent for China.
Today, Western Europe and America project themselves as great champions of human rights. It's utter nonsense. 71 is not too long ago. All of them, led by President Nixon and Kissinger in the United States and the Western powers, who are all part of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization and its sister organization, the SEATO and CENTO, of which Pakistan was a member, supported Pakistan, both militarily and in the world forums. We didn't have a friend in the world except for the Soviet Union and our immediate neighbors, Bhutan and Nepal. We didn't have a world thing. The organization of the Islamic states were all pro-Pakistani. Even traditional friends like Indonesia became pro-Pakistani. The events and what was happening inside East Pakistan was ignored by the Western press and ignored with a purpose, with an agenda of their own.
The war was fought both on the eastern and the western fronts in a very short span of time. India adopted an aggressive strategy on the eastern front and a defensive strategy on the western front.
The Blitzkrieg campaign that we ran to hit Dhaka, the last was seen only in the Second World War. That also in the North Africa region where both sides were switching sides, and it was possible in a desert. But here we achieved that in a riverine country at a speed as good as that. Nobody ever after that or before that had done such blitzkrieg action.
On the Eastern Front, the Indian Army defeated 4 divisions and 30,000 paramilitary forces of the Pakistani Army. The Indian Air Force too orchestrated its forces systematically. The prioritization was air defense of homeland first, counter-air bombing to pin PAF down next, followed by support to the Army and the Navy. In the east, 3 MiG-21 squadrons operating from Guwahati and Tezpur took part in counter-air escort and close air support tasks during the Blitzkrieg action in Bangladesh. In the Western theater, the MiG-21 was employed in its primary task, that of air defense, escort and interception.
We had the MiG-21s, we had the Su-7s, Sukhoi 7s, we had the Hunters, we had the Nats. These were the 4 main fighter fleets. Then we had the Canberras, which were the bombers. Indian Air Force, I must tell you, was also prepared for possible Chinese support to the Pakistanis or the American support, because the Enterprise carrier with the US 7th Fleet was already in the Bay of Bengal. But of course, the Indo-Soviet treaty, peace treaty and friendship cooperation signed in August 71 did help us. Now, IF commenced the first major operation that the Indian Air Force did was using the MiG-21s to knock off the main airfields at Tezgaon next to Dhaka. Now, that is where the squadron was. If we were to knock off that airfield, we would have grounded the entire Pakistan Air Force in that. And that is where the MiGs, they came, rocketed both Tezgaon and Kormetullah runways, and they repeated these attacks every few hours, so that within 3 days, Dhaka, all airfields around Dhaka were closed, and total air superiority had been achieved.
Experts believe one of the biggest reasons for the failure of the Pakistan Air Force was defection by Bengali technicians and pilots. The IAF also helped the Mukti Bahini organize a formation of light aircraft called Kilo Flight, which were manned and serviced by those who had defected from the PAF.
Pakistan had always ignored the Pakistani Air Force, and after the East Pakistan declared its own independence in early March 1971, the Bengali technicians, which formed nearly 50% of the Pakistan Air Force, they defected. Some of them were not trusted by Pakistan Air Force. They formed the Mukti Bahini. Indian Armed Forces helped the Mukti Bahini set up. We also helped them set up the Kilo Flight, which was an Air Force flight which had a handful of aeroplanes, but they are the guys who also took part in the war. In fact, they were the first to strike. Clearly, Indian Air Force had a favorable situation in the East also, because Pakistan had only 16 Sabre aircraft and a few transport and helicopters, compared to 13 fighter bomber squadrons of Indian Air Force. And similar was the ratio between transport and helicopter fleets.
We started training the Mukti Bahini, started supplying them a certain amount of weapons and organizing them into a guerrilla force. This started towards the end of May, about 2 months after the beginning of the troubles in East Bengal.
While fighting to liberate East Pakistan raged in the east, India strategically fought for containment on the Western Front. Flying officer Nirmaljit Singh Sekhon, a pilot of the Ghaznat detachment based in Srinagar, was one of the heroes of the 1971 war. Making the ultimate sacrifice, he defended the Srinagar airbase when it was attacked by a wave of 6 enemy Sabre aircraft. He was posthumously awarded the Paramveer Chakra, the highest gallantry award given to the Indian Armed Forces. Though air power was effectively used in 1965, the 1971 war was the first real tri-services war. The Air Force and Navy complemented the efforts of the Army in both the sectors with devastating effects. For the first time, the Indian Navy used firepower in all 3 dimensions that navies operate in: surface, subsurface, and air. The Indian Navy's first aircraft carrier, INS Vikrant, was used to launch an offensive and maintain a naval blockade of East Pakistan. Starting December 4th, her Seahawks and Elises flew nearly 300 sorties hammering Chittagong, Cox's Bazar, and Khulna. This continued for over a week, preventing the Pakistani army from dispatching reinforcements or evacuating by sea.
As far as Navy is concerned, I must tell you, in the East, they had moved their Vikrant into the Bay of Bengal, and they were doing air operations. They were hitting Chittagong, they were hitting targets, but there was good coordination between the Army and the Navy, Air Force and the Navy, so that we are not hitting the same targets at the same time. Similarly, on the West, the Air Force and the Navy hit Karachi Harbour and Karachi Airfield more or less simultaneously. We also hit their oil refineries while they were hitting the harbor, knocking off their, ships in the harbor. The Air Force was taking on the refinery and the airfield. So the coordination between the Navy and the Air Force was absolutely outstanding.
As far as the Navy is concerned, Karachi was blocked. We had sunk Ghazi. The Arabian Sea, the Bay of Bengal was also blocked. The Pakistanis could not escape from there. There was threat of Enterprise, the 7th Fleet. We did not bother. We were very sure that Enterprise is only trying to threaten us. It will never come close to us because they will also suffer. And once they suffer, it will be a great damage to the reputation of the US Navy. And they will only continue to deter us, threaten us, but they will not take part.
All this while, the Indian Army was making a lightning dash towards Dhaka. In a matter of days, India had Pakistan on its knees. Apart from taking nearly a quarter of the Pakistani army as prisoners of war, Indian forces also captured 15,000 square kilometers of its territory. India supported the Bangladesh liberation struggle with its heart and soul. An estimated 3 million East Bangladeshis had been killed in the genocide committed by West Pakistan. For India, it was a fight for justice.
मैं बिल्कुल टेंस नहीं था, मुझे कोई शक नहीं था कि क्या होगा, क्योंकि मैंने प्लान किया था पहले 7 महीने से प्लान किया था, काफ़ी फौज थी, अब मुझे कोई शक नहीं था कि क्या करेंगे.
As a nation, I think it is time that we forgot talking about the Panipats and Plasis and started celebrating the 71. For 2,000 years, we haven't had a victory like that.